for us to celebrate, right up there with Easter. Tends to be why people come out to Christmas and Easter. It's the only times of year the world tends to remember that Jesus, God, in the Bible exists. So, but that's exciting for us. So we're going to really be able to like end Acts of the Apostles, where we see the church become, as it has began and grown, right into the Advent season. Paul, this week, we find taking just a really interesting ship voyage. And as he takes a ship voyage, you have to remember where he's been. So we've had hearing after hearing. I'm not going to call them trials, right? Because essentially Paul hasn't been accused of anything. But he's had hearing after hearing. He's had hearings in front of the Jewish rulers, the Jewish courts, who really don't like him and really hate him. Turns out he's also a Roman citizen. So they try to end up killing him, and the Romans have to constantly come in and like bail Paul out of the situation. And then there are people before the Roman rulers, and the Jews seem to really hate Paul, who happens to be Jewish, but they hate him because he loves Jesus. And so they have this really interesting dynamic here. So now the Romans have this guy, all right, so more or less they have to end up protecting Paul for many years here as they try to determine what the problem really is, right? Because he's a Roman citizen, so the Romans have him, but they actually haven't tried him for anything. They haven't accused him of the actual Roman rule. According to them, some sort of Jewish sacramental or some sort of religious situation with Jewish people, the Hebrews really don't like him. So he's not a fan inside the temple, but inside the Roman construct, they have an issue because they don't have to try him with. But he has ultimately, most recently, we saw last week, appealed to the authority of Caesar. As a Roman citizen, he's being heard before a tribunal, and he's appealed to Caesar to actually hear his case. Which means Caesar must have been a really busy guy. I don't know if you realize this. So he's got to rule like over the entire Roman Empire, which at that time would have been known to them, modernized world, right, the civilized world to them. And he also randomly has to hear cases. So a whole segment of his portion of his day is like the Supreme Court, right? Just like people come in, like read a case, and decide whether to hear it or not, and decide if it's here or not. He has to be like pretty like efficient. So anyway, he's appealed to Caesar as a Roman citizen, right? Who has no actual, he has no actual accusations. His accusers are accusing him in the religious courts and the religious constructs in the temple of violating their laws. They're not Roman laws, not Rome's laws. So ultimately, he gets sent to Caesar, right, with kind of a more or less convoluted letter saying, hey, people want to kill this guy. We don't really know what to try him with. He has appealed to you to be heard before you, so we're sending him to you. It's kind of the situation. So this week we're going to see him take a fantastic voyage. And I've really waited for, I just feel like there's only a few parents back, but I'm just going to start anyway. So to kick off our sermon, just to wake everybody up. I don't know about you, about once every, let's say it used to be like a month, but now that I'm not 20 anymore, it's like once every 2 or 3 weeks where all of my lack of sleep catches up to me. Anybody have a day like that? Or a day, maybe you have a week longer, maybe you have a week like that, maybe you have all right. But I have a day like that every 2 to 3 weeks, all right? I get maybe, like many of you, 5 to 6 hours sleep a night. That's not super healthy. I understand, all right? But at the same time, it's also kind of what has to happen. I have 3 kids. I have a lot to do. So I get 5 to 6 hours of sleep. So it catches up with me. So that was last night. So I'm just trying to get my sermon notes together, and I'm trying to make sure all the slides look good and flow, and I'm asleep. I'm not doing this, right? The TV's on, my wife's next to me. She's asleep. She's just sleeping, which is totally fine on the couch. That's fine. And then, of course, I also fall asleep. And then I'm sleeping, I wake up, I'm like, okay, I'm going to just do it, and then I'm not sleeping. And then, so like all these thoughts that I want to pour out, we're going to have to wait until the morning. So that was last night. So for you, I don't know if that was a weekend, it's been a weekend for you, or as Jesse previously said, that it's been quite a week for him. It's been a week for me. So I thought to start our sermon, and since our sermon title is A Fantastic Voyage, I don't know if this actually is going to relate to a lot of us because we're just not in that necessarily generation that lived through it, but we should remember this. This is something we should remember. So I need everybody to stand up. All right. And has anybody here ever seen the movie Hitch with Will Smith?
Yes.
All right. So if I'm going to tell you, here's a scene in which Will Smith is teaching Kevin James to dance. Do you recall this? Right. Now, Kevin James has an idea of how he'd like to dance, right? And Will Smith has the concrete way in which Kevin James is supposed to dance, right? You all with me? All right, so we're gonna follow Will Smith's instructions, all right? This time we need a little space between each other just so you can step, all right? So you're gonna follow with me, and then we're going to watch a short video to get us ready for a fantastic voyage. This is how I'm putting the microphone down. I just realized for recording purposes, that's never what you do. This is how Will Smith teaches going to do the stand, right? He's going to do one step to the right. You can follow me. You step to your left. Follow me this way. Because if you step to the right and I step to the right, it's opposite ways. I'm going to get confused. You step the same direction I step. Right? So you go to the right. You claps. Left. Right. You got it. All right. Now we need the video. Right.
I don't know how to make it play.
If you just click on it, it'll pop up on the screen.
It's on the screen, but it's not making any sound.
It's no, we don't have it. Dang it. Oh, stop. It'd be great. Oh no. We don't have it plugged into the.
Oh, that would have been good. Oh, that would have been so good.
Now I'm curious. It's Lakeside singing Fantastic Voyage. Somebody ever heard of Fantastic Voyage? This is a classic funk song, and you all should go Google it later.
Oh, you should get it on your phone and play it into the microphone.
That would be the violation of.
And now you're hot.
Oh, please, that song's still there. That's why it's on one of all the compilation CDs.
Sad.
What's that too? Would have been great. We in the church would have been dancing together.
So
the classic 70s era funk song.
Fantastic Voyage.
Okay. The captain. Has anyone heard the song? Anita, about no one?
I mean, I might, but I just don't know it.
Gosh. That hurts me almost as much.
I'll know if I send that.
You guys know this song. That was going to be great. Go home later and Google a Fantastic Voyage, okay? It's going to be great. In fact, if you Google the YouTube video, you'll get that video. And it's just so classic because the music video is just them, really singing and playing, and they have this boat set up, ship set up, which is perfect for the sermon day. They're in these incredibly ostentatious, just funk outfits with plumage and colors, and it's just.
Oh.
Anyway, we're in Acts 27. So we're going to take a Fantastic Voyage today. Ship voyage, just so you know, in ancient writings, is similar to what we would see in our movies as the modern day car chase. Every very popular ancient writing often involved a voyage of some sort. You can think one of those more like obscure, ancient sort of pre-Greek writings. What is one of the most famous ones you can think of? An Odyssey, right? By, who wrote that? Good job, you guys are great. That whole thing is about a voyage. The whole thing is about a journey. This is a very common ancient writing technique, but it's really weird that Luke would seem to include this, because in many instances we've seen in the book of Acts, there's lots of voyages. There's voyages and journeys and trips, and usually Luke tends to be pretty concise, right? They left from this place, they got to this place. He tends to be very concise in those. We have a whole chapter right now towards the end of Acts that is going to be just this ship voyage. Now, it's a very interesting ship voyage, but it's not the most it's not the interestingest ship voyage that we can think that Paul may have had. So one of the questions we have to answer today is why this is even here as it is, but we can get to some really good reasons for it. Paul has appealed to Caesar, and they're going to send him to Caesar. So we're going to pick up the reading in verse 1 of Acts 27 on this fantastic voyage. Our first point is that right out of the gate is our first point, and right out of the gate there's going to be just some issues that are going to happen with this journey. And we're going to get our setting, we're going to get what's going on with this voyage all from the first point. So we're just reading the first 12 verses. All right, so if you have your text open, you can go there. If you're near someone with a text open, you should just huddle up and get warm and snugly, because that's important. There will be lots of verses on the screen later, but the whole chapter of Acts 27 is not going to be on the screen. So if you start in verse 1 with me, I'll read the first 12 verses, we'll get our setting set up. It says this: "And when it was decided that we should sail for Italy, they delivered Paul and some other prisoners to a centurion of the Augustan cohort named Julius, and embarking in a ship of," all these big words, you just got to say them fast, okay? I do not have a Greek degree. I have a degree in BS, but we can talk about that later. That is literally my degree. It's not funny. It's a little funny. All right, verse 2. Embarking on a ship of Andromedium. Okay, that's not the metal the ship was made out of. It wasn't made out of Andromedium, right? That's where this ship is either from or going. That's usually how they destine the ships. All right. Which was about to sail to the ports along the coast of Asia. We put to sea, accompanied by Aristarchus, a Macedonian from Thessalonica. The next day we put in at Sidon, and Julius, that's the Roman leader guy, treated Paul kindly and gave him leave to go to his friends and be cared for. And putting out to sea from there, we sailed under the lee of Cyprus, because the winds were against us. When we had sailed across the open sea along the coast of Cilicia and Pamphylia, we came to Myra in Lycia. There, the centurion found a ship of Alexandria sailing for Italy and put us on board. We sailed slowly for a number of days and arrived with difficulty off Cnidus. That's one word. And as the wind did not allow us to go farther, we sailed under the lee of Crete off Salmon. Coasting along, and with difficulty, we came to a place called Fair Havens, near which was the city of Lasea. Since much time had passed, and the voyage was now dangerous, because even the fast was already over, Paul advised them, saying, Sirs, I perceive that the voyage will be with injury and much loss, not only to the cargo in the ship, but also of our lives. But the centurion paid more attention to the pilot and the owner of the ship than to what Paul had said. And because the harbor was not suitable to spend the winter, the majority decided to put out to sea from there, on the chance that somehow they could reach Phoenix, a harbor of Crete, that was facing both southwest and northwest, and there spent the winter. This is how the journey begins. All right, I'm going to give you a map.
A map.
No, it's okay, fine. I'm doing something. It's right in there. It is literally called Paul's Journey to Rome. Okay, pretty easy. All right, and now I wish I had my pointer.
Yeah, I have no idea what that is.
No, that's good. Well, it's good to know. If I had my laser pointer, I would kind of show you how Paul lines
Is
himself up
anything going to go right?
at Rome. But it's okay, because you can see the red line. And the red line is going to be his journey. This journey, all right, right down that you can't see it. We're picking up this journey after the first arrow ends. All right, so the first little arrow is down here today. It's probably blocked by the speaker. It's a little jump. We're going to end our journey all the way over here. See where it says Mediterranean, above the eye, this little point. That's where we're going to end our journey up. So we're going to cover from all the way over here off the coast, where you're looking at almost like where modern day Israel would be, and end up all the way over here near what is actually a small island off the coastal islands of Italy. They've made it thus far, all right. They've made it right around to like the central point of the line. So we're halfway through the journey already, and it's been very, very bad. I'll have my laser pointer next week so we can finish the journey. Although by that point, it's a small little nook up to Italy, but I'll get it this week. So we made it halfway through the journey, and it's going really rough. The winds are actually pushing against them, but we really don't know much. We haven't actually, unless we really kind of cracked into God's word, we don't know our setting. We don't know what's going on. Who is with Paul? There's some great questions we can answer here. So as Paul sets out on this journey, there's important things to remember. The first thing I want you to remember is Paul's not alone. And we can tell that there's we mentioned 3 people specifically in this text already. All right. So if you were following along reading, or if you were listening and you were thinking, all right, the first person actually appears in verse 1 of Acts 27. If you read Acts 27:1, take a second, and I want you to tell me who we can now know from what we know in the book of Acts is automatically with Paul on this journey. Right? Read Acts 27:1. One person by name we can know. Luke. Why? Why do we know this? Because his pronouns changed. Luke, the author of the book of Acts, right, often many times took care of Paul. He was a physician and a doctor. He was writing the book of Acts as he had already written the Gospel of Luke, right? For a Roman official, to let the Roman official know that everything that had been accounted to him of Jesus as the Savior was actually historically true. This was the story of Jesus and his church. Here you go. That's what Luke was commissioned to do. So here the pronoun changes to we. This means Luke is now a part of Paul's journey to Rome. We also have another name. This guy's going to be Roman in the first couple of verses here. What's his name? Julius. It's a good name, right? Makes me think of Dairy Queen. They have an orange Julius. It's quite delicious. Julius is a centurion. Now he's a very fancy centurion, right? He actually is part of the Augustan cohort, which makes him kind of a big deal. He's something of a big deal. Julius is. And Julius is actually going to be seen later in this section. He's kind to Paul. Every time, oftentimes we see a centurion mentioned, it turns out that Luke speaks very highly of him. Right? From the first centurion, we know that actually begins the gospel going to the Gentiles, right? In Caesarea. What was his name? Cornelius, right? Cornelius. He's Roman. He's a Roman official. He is a Roman, right, leader in the army. He takes in this, he becomes saved, right? And so we see that from there on, we see centurion Roman official actually saying, Paul, you're not as crazy as the Hebrews seem to make you out to be, right? Or Paul, let me provide some protection for you. Or Paul, let me show you some kindness. Here, yet again, Julius is showing kindness to Paul. It's very interesting because these men, I think one of the things that's really cool to understand about Roman Empire is they were very focused on law, honor, and duty. It's one of the things that surrounded the culture, right? Paul was not an evil murderer. He was not a criminal in any way. He had not broken any of the laws that they could actually ascertain and tell, right? And Paul actually, to his defense, is constantly loving people that he's around because he wants to give them what? Every time he wants to give them the gospel. He's going to tell them about the gospel. It's almost like Paul shows up and he's like, hey, you want to do this now or later? So I'm going to give you the gospel at some point, right? And that's Paul's MO. So Julius here is just reciprocating that and being kind to Paul on this journey. Also with him, it's interesting, we have a person named, and he's got a fun name to say, Aristarchus is with him. Now he's a Macedonian from Thessalonica. So this would have been actually a person from the church of Thessalonica. A person from the church of Thessalonica sent to help Paul, and he's going to journey with him on this fantastic voyage to Rome. You can actually, I think I included Colossians 4:10 there as one of the verses. You can put it up because it's just an interesting verse, I think, for us to read and remember for a second. Colossians 4:10, the screen is usually on this side, so when you see me keep spinning to reference the screen, it's because it's now over here. So Colossians 4:10, Aristarchus, my fellow prisoner, greets you, and Mark, the cousin of Barnabas, that's really why I wanted to read this verse, concerning whom you have received instructions. If he comes to you, welcome him. Aristarchus is actually going to be with Paul the whole time he's imprisoned in Rome. Colossians is written from Paul's imprisonment in Rome. So you have Luke and Aristarchus, two men coming along Paul's journey to specifically help and encourage him. Right? As part of Paul, they would have actually turned over, it's an interesting concept, they would have turned over what they would have had as freedom to journey with Paul, right, the prisoner. They would have been following the prisoner and viewed in some way as a little loony, that they would give up their freedom for the sake of service to a prisoner. This is an interesting concept. I want you to just ponder for a second. They're giving up their freedom to serve. I'm just going to let that sit with you for a second as you think about it. But that's what literally Luke and Aristarchus are doing. Here in this verse of Colossians 4:10, it seems also that somebody else is going to join Paul in Rome as he writes this verse. Who is it? Mark. We would know him as Mark. John Mark. He wrote the Gospel of Mark. Right. Why is it interesting that John Mark is a part of Paul's ministry team in Rome?
Because he didn't want to take him on one of the other missionary
He didn't
journeys.
want to take him on his second missionary journey. You remember? Paul and Barnabas. They journeyed together on Paul's first missionary journey, right? And then as they're about to set out on Paul's second missionary journey, right? What happens between Paul and Barnabas? They have a sharp disagreement, really over whether to take John Mark. John Mark happens to be, it tells us right here, the cousin of Barnabas. So it was Barnabas, the great encourager, saying, no, we should take John Mark. And Paul saying, no, we're not going to take John Mark. Remember, we just started out our first missionary journey, and he was like, for some reason, went back all the way back to Jerusalem. Why would I take that guy? He's going to cause me problems. And Barnabas is like, no, you know what happened, right? You don't know what happened. But Barnabas is like, you know what happened, and he's ready to go. He's already committed. He's fully in this time. And so they had a sharp disagreement on whether to take John Mark, right? Paul takes Silas and goes one way. Barnabas takes John Mark and goes another way. All that separation resulting from the disagreement over John Mark. Here in Colossians 4:10 turns up again at the end of Paul's ministry while Paul's in prison in Rome, right? Helping Paul. It's actually one of the things John Mark did, right, as a well-educated man, was pen things for the men he was working with. So we have the Gospel of Mark. Now, Mark wasn't necessarily around for the life of Jesus. His gospel is attributed to the apostle Peter. Mark was with Peter and wrote down Peter's account of the gospel of Jesus Christ's life. That's why Mark is a very fast-paced book, because what we know about Peter is he kind of just jumped in, right? Peter was often the man with his foot in his mouth, right? Or at least the foot out the door. He was always moving. So you read the Gospel of Mark, you'd be like, and they were here and they did this, and they were here and they did this, and then they showed up here and they did this thing, and then this thing happened, and this person showed up, and this. That's how the Gospel of Mark reads. So John Mark, who had this issue with Paul, is going to be with Paul at Rome. I just think that's encouraging. And that's encouraging to remember, just to remind us that relationships are hard and difficult, and sometimes they take a turn that we don't necessarily see coming. And what's amazing about the gospel, what's amazing about the truth of Jesus Christ is that it's all about redemption. Redemption, literally buying back that which is broken, fixing, healing, right? That's what the gospel of Jesus Christ is all about. And here, what we see is redemption in the form of reconciliation. John Mark and Paul ministering together at what's really going to be the end point of Paul's ministry and also the end point of Paul's life in Rome. Amazing. So I'm going to leave that, and we're going to move on. So Aristarchus, Luke are with him. Julius, this great centurion leader, is with him. We also know that the boat has a captain. We also know that the boat has a pilot. All right, so think of him as like the chief navigator, if you will. So that's kind of cool. We have a pilot, a captain. We have at least 100 Roman soldiers, right? Because we know that Julius is a what?
Centurion.
Centurion does what? Great, has command over 100 soldiers. All right. So we got a lot of people here. We also know that additionally there's some random amount of prisoners, because there are prisoners with Paul. It's actually more probable these particular prisoners, don't know why or what they have done, but it's actually more likely that these particular prisoners are actually convicted, right, or at least stand accused of specific violation of Roman law, and so they are also going to Rome. So we know that we have this very amalgamous kind of group kind of coming together here. And they've taken some small boats, along the coast, they faced some pretty rough trials here. And they end up at this port. It's actually very interesting that they end up at this particular port, because this port is called Fair Havens. That to me sounds like a great place, right? I want to go vacation at Fair Havens. It sounds like something circa Nantucket, maybe. It's in Nantucket, you go to Fair Havens, and it's this beautiful little, like, maybe old-fashioned island where you kind of like pull in with your car, and you go on a really like old rickety ferry, and you go across, and it's very like quaint and like clean and fancy and nice. That's not what Fair Havens is here in the Bible. So that's all. It's a place that sounds like I would like to visit in my imagination. It is actually a place that's not going to be a good port, because we know also when it is. And that's our next point I want you to catch. We know when this is taking place. Specifically in verse 9 it says, since much time had passed and the voyage was now dangerous, because even the fast, and if you have your Bible open, fast is probably capitalized, the fast, right, was already over. The fast here is denoting a specific time when they would have fasted. It would have been during the feast on the Day of Atonement. That would have been the time of year in the Jewish calendar that they would have been fasting, right? Here we have several Jews, Paul being one of them, Hebrews of Hebrews, and they are still observing the fast for the Day of Atonement. The fast was over. When does your Sunday say, well, when does that happen? The Day of Atonement, again, a lunar calendar, so it's going to be a little flexible, kind of like Easter flexes. You know how Easter isn't on the same day every year? It's because Easter is based off of a lunar calendar, which the Hebrews use. All right. So the Day of Atonement would have been from late September to early October. That's our time frame for when particularly when it landed. Now, here's what you didn't know about the Mediterranean Sea, particularly the vessels in ancient times sailing in the Mediterranean Sea. After November, nobody sailed. It was the stormy time of year, right? So they are right now in the heart of what's coming into the winter stormy time of year, right? If this was a later occurring Day of Atonement, it would have been early October. They're looking at very few days left at sea before it is straight unsailable, right? So after November 1st, nobody sails the Mediterranean, but not now. Okay, our boats are different. Back then, no one sailed after November 1st because boats couldn't take it. The seas would come up, right? And it was like a no-go. So we know when this is happening. We know that Paul has some people on his journey, all right? And then what happens is we see this interesting group rise up right now that they're staying in Fairhaven, right? And Fairhaven has a problem. It's a smaller port. It's not going to be a good port to put your boat in for the whole winter. So they're like, oh, should they come to the boat? They can't sail. Now we're at this place, which sounds magical, but is not, right? And what do? We can't leave the boat here. Okay, this port is gonna get hammered with storms, and there's no good place to weigh anchor to keep the boat safe for even the winter. So we're both going to get destroyed. So they have to make a decision. Do we stay here, try to batten down the hatches, which is it's a sailing trip. Do we stay here, right? It's a fantastic voyage. All right, so do we stay here? Do we batten down the hatches for the winter, or do we try to sail on and find a better port? Particularly, they're aiming at the port of Phoenix, which is not for them, all right, out in Nevada. Okay, this is a different Phoenix. Right? So they're aiming for the port of Phoenix. Now, Phoenix is great, all right, because specifically it tells us it's facing both southwest and northwest. It's going to allow them good protection from the storms that will happen during the winter. And that's what they would like to do. Get there, get in the port, have some safety and stability, weigh the anchor, spend the winter at Phoenix. Not super far, they think they can make it. All right? But here's where we get this interesting group of councils going to come up. You have, this is the last point under this section of scripture, you have a centurion, a captain, a pilot, and a missionary making this decision, right? The missionary is the curious one, is it not? Right, you have the man who's really chartered the vessel right now. That's the guy, centurion, right? He's got the most invested in this. He's got a lot of people involved in this, all right? So this cargo is very important to the captain, the one who owns the ship, all right, and the pilot, right, who's piloting the ship. But also now you have people paying money, particularly Romans paying money to sail on this boat, all right? So you have the centurion. You have the captain who owns the thing. It's the owner of the boat. That's the captain, right? He's really going to be one of the guys that decides what happens with this boat. All right, and then you have a pilot, right, who's supposed to be the one that navigates, supposed to know what's happening, the time of year, the weather changes, how the water is going, right? There's a science to sailing, and that's what he knows. And then you got the missionary. Why is the missionary involved? So I gave you a verse there, 2 Corinthians 25. 2 Corinthians was written prior to this story in Acts. So when we read it, understand that as Paul recounts the events in 2 Corinthians, here in this particular passage, he's recounting events that happened before he is on this journey in Acts, all right? So that should be a piece of scripture you can click on, we can read together. 3 times I was beaten with rods, once I was stoned, and 3 times I was shipwrecked. I spent a night and a day, I was adrift at sea. All right, so these events that Paul just recounted happened before this. Well, we know that Paul spent much time on boats. Also, not only that, Paul spent time on boats in bad weather. Paul spent time on boats in bad weather that have been crushed. Paul has then also spent time alive, living through, adrift at sea, both the night and the day. That's crazy. So what they know about Paul is he's been around the block, so to speak. Right? And so that's why Paul has a voice here to weigh in. Paul has literally been shipwrecked 3 times. He has been adrift at sea a day and a night. And somehow he stands before these men. That was odd. He should have been, for all logical accounts, Paul should have been dead. But he's not just on his journey, he's on God's journey for him. So God has kept Paul alive, right? One of the other promises that we're going to have to remember later is that Paul has also received, right, from Jesus himself that he will go to Rome. Jesus has encouraged him and said, thank you. You've done such a great job, right? Being a light to the Hebrews, you will also need to take that light and be an example in Rome, right? Literally, you're going to have to give your testimony, testify also in Rome. So Paul knows he's going to Rome. This is not a question to him. However, Paul here, as this council comes together, says, guys, you're going to lose a lot. You're going to lose the cargo of the ship. You're going to lose lives. We should not sail from here. But the captain, right, doesn't like the way his boat's going to have to be fairing here during winter. The pilot says we have enough time. It's not a far journey to Phoenix. And the centurion, looking at all this, says, well, we really do need to move on to a place that will keep all these prisoners for the winter. Let's get going. He also falls ultimately outnumbered 3-1. Now the difference is he's outnumbered 3 people that have a totally different goal than he does to 1, right? Paul, we'll see, has obviously been praying. He's been seeking God's wisdom as to what's happening here. And Paul is actually concerned about everyone that's on the ship. Paul is totally fine. He's not worried about his loss of life. He is willing to die for Jesus. He has told us several times, and all throughout like Acts 20 to Acts 24. He's like, it's okay, guys. I'm going to get back to Jerusalem. I might die. It's okay. I'm here to give my life even for the one who saved me. All right. So Paul says, let's not go. They look around, right? The centurion's like, I think we should go. And he's like, well, the captain thinks we should go. The pilot thinks we should go. Paul, 3-1. The simple majority wins, and they're going to move on. Now, here's where we're going to pick up the reading in verse 13. And this is the largest, try talking again. Talking is difficult. This is the largest chunk of scripture that we're going to go through. And all I really want you to hear as we go through it is this really cool story. It's the story now of the second half of this journey they're going to take that's going to culminate them ending up at a very small island. So starting in verse 13, we're going to see that this is how it starts out, right? Acts 27:13. This is under the point that I told you so or why. I don't know how exactly the title of this particular section of scripture we're about to read. Either it's I told you so, all right? Paul's going to get to say I told you so, or it's entitled why. Again, we don't know why this story is in here. It's interesting that he would encapsulate this huge story. We don't, up to this point, Paul has been shipwrecked 3 times. He has spent a night and a day adrift at sea. We do not have those accounts. Why do we have this one? So I didn't know exactly how to title this particular section of scripture, but ultimately it does end, and I told you so. Starting in verse 13, it says, now when the south wind blew gently, supposing that they had obtained their purpose, they weighed anchor and sailed along Crete, close to the shore. Here's what happened. The south wind blows a little bit, and the centurion looks at the pilot, who looks at the captain. They smile a little bit at each other and look at Paul like, south wind's blowing, Paul. Obviously, this is going to. Like, I'm not appealing to the authority. You may want to listen. I'm just saying. All right. South wind blows. They're like, oh, we're going to stay close to the shore. This is going to be great. Verse 14. But soon, and here's the word, a tempestuous wind called the nor'easter. Have you ever heard of a nor'easter? You ever heard of it? Nor'easter? Weather term? You should have all heard of it. We've experienced different nor'easters at times here in New Jersey. Right? A northeaster struck down from the land. And when the ship was caught and could not face the wind, we gave way to it and were driven along. Running under the lee of a small island called Cauda, we managed with difficulty to secure the ship's boat. Talk about that. After hoisting it up, they used supports to undergird the ship. Then, fearing that they would run aground on the Syrtis, they lowered the gear, and thus they were driven along. So since we were violently storm-tossed, they began the next day to jettison the cargo, and on the third day, they threw the ship's tackle overboard, and with their own hands, when neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, and no small tempest lay on us, the saved was at last abandoned. Verse 21. Since they had been without food for a long time, Paul stood up among them and said, men, you should have listened to me and not have set sail from Crete and incurred this injury and loss. Yet now I urge you, take heart, for there will be no loss of life among you, but only of the ship. For this very night there stood before me an angel of God, to whom I belong and to whom I worship. And he said, do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand before Caesar. And behold, God has granted you all those who sail with you. So take heart, men. I have faith in God that it will be exactly as I have been told. But we must run aground on some island. Verse 27. When the 14th night had come, as we were being driven across the Adriatic Sea, about midnight the sailors suspected that they were nearing land. So they took a sounding and found 20 fathoms. And a little further on, they took a sounding again and found 15 fathoms. Just to be clear, that's about 120 feet and then 90 feet. That would be them going shallower. And fearing that we might run on the rocks, they let down 4 anchors from the stern and prayed for day to come. And as the sailors were seeking to escape from the ship and had lowered the ship's boat into the sea under pretense of laying out anchors from the bow, Paul said to the centurion and the soldiers, unless these men stay in the ship, you cannot be saved. And then the soldiers cut away the ropes of the ship's boat and let it go. As day was about to dawn, Paul urged them all to take some food, saying, today is the 14th day that you have continued in suspense without food, having taken nothing. Therefore I urge you to take some food, for it will give you strength, for not a hair is to perish from the head of any of you. When he had said these things, he took bread, giving thanks to God in the presence of all, he broke it and began to eat. Then they all were encouraged and ate some food themselves. We were in all 276 persons in the ship. When they had eaten enough, they lightened the ship, throwing out the wheat into the sea. All right, so big long story, ultimately about a really, really rough storm. So I'll give you two Greek words in this section. The first word is Euroclydon. That is actually the word that the sailors would have used to denote, words are very difficult today, to denote the nor'easter that they were in. The tempestuous sea, this tumultuous mess that they are in, literally being tossed to and fro. Now, as this tempest comes along, right, as we had this gentle south breeze blowing us out of the Fair Haven port, and it was going to be great, but not till thereafter rises up this nor'easter. It's very, very dangerous. In fact, so dangerous is it that as they come under this place called Cauda, and I want you to remember Cauda because it's very important. Here's where some things happen. They bring in the dinghy. What you're thinking, what's a dinghy? A dinghy is a small boat they would have carried behind them. It's a small boat. They would have had the boat trailing behind their vessel, and it would have been kind of like similar to a life raft or a porting boat, where they would have landed in port and been able to, in the middle of the port, then get into the dinghy and go to shore, perhaps finding out where it was best to bring their boat, unload their cargo, maybe get other supplies, maybe find a guy who can fix a boat, stuff like that, right? That's the dinghy. They're actually finding this as they go under Cauda, they're finding some rest. So they're pulling in the dinghy, and they're going to put the dinghy on the boat. That's to keep the dinghy from, one, not also becoming damaged, but also not two, turning into a missile in the middle of the storm and damaging their boat itself. Well, in the dinghy is on the boat. And then it tells us that Cauda, they also secure the ship. What they would have done is taken ropes and chains, and as they had this respite from the wind and being tossed back and forth, they would have actually run ropes and chains under the boat and around, literally to hold the planking together so they would not continue to take on water as they're being ripped through this storm. These are men that know what's going on with the boat. They know what's going on with this storm, and they are very, very afraid. So afraid are they that they let down what they call the gear, right, which would have been really like a kind of dragging anchor that would have actually allowed them not to be tossed quite so much because they were afraid that as they were leaving the secure area, they'd be tossed against rocks. So they let down the gear, right, this anchor that would have continued to weigh them down so that they're not being quite as violently thrown around. They're going to leave that thing just kind of dragging in the water as they're in this nor'easter. That's what happens at Cauda. So from Cauda, they're going to then embark on this journey where there's obviously no place for them to actually be. Cauda is more or less like a rock that is not inhabitable and you cannot really scale, and you're going to just get crushed against it if you actually try to land on it. So they're leaving it, right? As they're leaving the storm, which they have very little control over, is tossing them back and forth. As they're starting to despair, right, to Paul. And this is where the I told you so part comes in. You see it starting in verse 21 when Paul says, "Men, you should have listened to me and not have set sail from Crete and incurred this injury and loss." Paul comes in and says, "Guys, I told you, all right?" And now he's not saying I told you so to make the centurion, the captain, the pilot feel degraded, because, I mean, this is either the time or the place. Can we all agree? Everyone's looking at this like, hey, we might all die here. So this isn't the kind of time and place where you're like, I told you guys, look at you fools. No, what he's saying is, as I told you so previously, right? Hear me now. That's what he's saying. Like, I told you this would happen. Now listen to what I have to say. And Paul recounts to them this very encouraging news. It's very encouraging news. I want to say it's very encouraging because literally, as I understand, they haven't seen the sun or the sky in days. All they've been being done is whipped around by wind and rain, with the boat being held together as they like lashed it together. Right? This is a very scary time for these men. And they've lost hope, really. It's a hopeless situation to them. These are guys that have been at sea their whole being is to sail boats and cargo. That's how they make their money. The only time they'd spend it inland would be on leave. That's it. All right. He says, don't worry, guys. Just focus. I got this vision. Now, as I told you this would happen, hear me now as I tell you what will happen. Right? An angel came to me, an angel from the God that Paul says he belongs to and serves. This is the God in which the Hebrews know. This is the God that Jesus is, that Messiah had come. This is the God he is speaking of. It's God, Holy Father God, that sent an angel to him. And as the angel came to him, the message was, Paul, don't worry. You will be saved. Everyone on this boat will be saved. You're going to lose the boat, you'll lose the cargo, but no one will die. That's the message. That's an encouraging message when you're in the middle of a place that looks like you're pretty much just going to die violently at sea. This is a rough time. And it's interesting because the Greek word here that he uses, we know is actually also used in the book of James. The word is, I'm going to say it fast, euthymeo, all right? So we go to the screen, that's how it's written. Euthymeo, there's an O at the end. Did I not type that? I did not type that. There's an O at the end of that. Euthymeo, all right? And the O is long. All right, there you go. Not that way. Couldn't go at the end. You could do that. Euthymeo actually literally means this. Okay, this is going to be a very loose translation, but this is how it kind of means. Don't worry, be happy. That's the translation. Do you know that song? Okay, I'm going to go to other places that we go. Don't worry, be happy. Right? You guys got it? All right. That's what he's telling these men. If you go to, James, I will include the verse. I believe it's James 5, I want to say 14. If you include that verse, what you'll see is that it literally there is translated cheerful. The verse is translated cheerful. So he's telling them, guys, literally, don't be upset, be happy. These guys are looking at him like, look, I know you made the right call initially, you shouldn't have left Crete, but now you want me to be happy? I mean, really, Paul, is there some sort of hallucinogenic mushrooms below ship that you've been taking? Because look around here, man, right? Now, what you're also going to see here is the change. As he has told these men this encouraging word, they begin to accept what he has said, right? We see this even as the story prevails, right? They're now being tossed back and forth. They're coming to where they feel they're coming close to land. These are sailors. They know what's going on. And they actually sense that they're coming to land, so they take what's called a sounding. That's where you, if you would more accurately think of it nowadays, it's kind of like radar. So you think when they send out sound waves, right? And then they come back and you can use those sound waves to map what's around you. That's sounding. Here, though, there's no radar because there's no electricity. They're going to let down a measurement rope with weight on it to see the bottom. They see the bottom's 120 feet. They pull it up, they sail a little further, they let it down. They see the bottom's 90 feet, so they know that they're right because they're sailors and they know what's going on. They're like, we are definitely getting closer to land. The way the weather's behaving, the way the water's behaving, the pilot knows we're getting closer to land. They let it down. They're approaching land at a good clip. I mean, they knocked off 30 feet, so now they're concerned, hey, we're gonna run onto some sort of jagged rocks or something, or something's gonna be bad. We need to let all the anchors out. They're letting all the anchors out, right? Some soldiers get scared, and they're like, hey, let's make this plan. If we get the dinghy, then we can get off this place and not get shipwrecked on some sort of jagged coral reef and die. Let's get into the dinghy, and we'll kind of separate ourselves and take a good survey of the land, right? And they're like, oh, hey, we're gonna jump in the dinghy, and we're gonna let some anchors out, over there on that side. They let the dinghy down. The Paul's like, wait. If you let these guys go, everyone on this ship can die. And that's what he tells the centurion. Here's how you know starting to believe it. The soldiers look around and they cut the dinghy off. They cut it off. No one's getting on the dinghy. If Paul says everybody has to stay on the boat, everybody has to stay on the boat, they cut the dinghy. They're also hungry because they're like, hey, we're gonna be at sea for a while. They haven't been eating, right? They've been working hard not to die, okay? And they've also been trying to save their rations. What happened? They don't know how far off course they are. Turns out they're like 500 miles off course, just so you know. They don't know what to do. So he looks at them and he says, guys, we are close to land. We need to eat something because I told you none of you is going to die. And if you don't eat something soon, you're going to die. That defeats the purpose of what I told you. So he literally tells them they need to eat. He gives thanks to God, right? And actually, I just wanted to submit to you, this would have been a time when Paul would have viewed it as communion, right? He's literally going to break the bread and serve these men, and they're going to join in with him. Right? So at first they're apprehensive, they're like, hey, we need to save our actions. Then they're like, well, look, Paul's doing this. And so when you see the men actually do, they break the fast they had had, and they eat with Paul and give thanks to God. But we know what Paul is, at any time he's ever had time to speak to anyone, what does Paul always talk about? The gospel, Jesus. Jesus has come. He is the Savior you need. You need a Savior. You know this place is broken. You know that perfect exists. You have a concept of it. You need a structure. There's a thing that you know this isn't right. In your own life, in the world around you as you view. Stuff is messed up. We need to be rescued from our state of peril. He gets to the gospel. Jesus has come to be the rescuer that we need. That's what he does. So I just want you to understand, although it's not written here, and it's written longer, Paul is definitely going to communicate the gospel to these guys. Absolutely 100%. So as we close out this particular section, they eat, they get done eating, They have the break of day. They see that land is coming, right? And then they begin to, again, continue lightening the ship. Now they're throwing over all that is left of the wheat, it says. They're literally throwing over all the cargo now. All the cargo is spent. This well-laden ship of wheat that was taking wheat to sell, right, is abandoning all hope of this being a fruitful journey. Again, this is yet another example of them having understood what Paul said, that the cargo would be a loss, the ship would be a loss, but life would be saved. They're throwing over all of the wheat now, completely lightening the boat as far as it can be, except for the 276 people on the boat. The cargo had 276 people. That's a lot of people. You got our sergeant was there, Luke was there, Paul was there, Julius was there. We have a pilot, we have a captain. We have 5 guys, all right? One of them is a centurion, so we then have 105 guys to get 100 soldiers. We're gonna have a crew on the boat. That's the people that put the sails up and whatnot. So we had them, and then we also had prisoners to round out the 276 lives that were on this boat. That Paul says, God's gonna save us, though we can't tell how. Day breaks, they have land in view, they have lightened up the wheat, and this is how the story ends. And it does end with the boat being completely lost, verse 39. Now, when it was day, they did not recognize the land, but they noticed a bay with a beach on which they planned, if possible, to run their ship ashore. So they cast off the anchors and left them in the sea, at the same time loosening the ropes that tied the rudders. Then hoisting the foresail to the Then hoisting the foresail to the wind, they made for the beach. But striking a reef, they ran the vessel around. The bow struck and remained immovable, and the stern was being broken up by the surf. The soldiers' plan was to kill the prisoners, lest any should swim away and escape. But the centurion, wishing to save Paul, kept them from carrying out their plan. He ordered those who could swim to jump overboard first and make for the land, and the rest on the planks or on pieces of the ship. And so it was that all were brought safely to land. Okay, that's crazy. That last phrase of this chapter, that all were brought safely to land, is insane. This is not like a giant cruise ship, all right, by poor piloting, having a serious issue in the middle of a harbor where it has actual lifeboats that are enough for everyone on the boat. This is not that situation where the lifeboats are going to be able to survive and get people off a boat to land. This is a situation where you had a boat overloaded with wheat and people, all right, that was made out of wood by hand, cut, strong wood, but not wood to last this kind of storm. Runs aground on a reef, which literally catches it and catches so it can't move. Instead of being ripped apart by the waves because the reef forms a natural barrier to break coastline. Anybody see Moana? It's great we can reference Moana in a way that actually makes sense. It's real. It's like science. Moana, right? Spoiler alert. Okay. It's gonna be a beach watch it. Moana, as you see, they have a reef that makes a sort of natural barrier on the island, right? And Moana's whole thing is that, inside of her is this place that's calling her to go beyond the reef, right? That's kind of the whole premise of the movie. And her dad and the village say we don't go beyond the reef. That's the whole premise. And the movie really starts when she goes beyond the reef. But as she tries to cross the reef the first time, what happens? Everyone has seen the movie, right? She capsizes because what's happening is the reef forms this natural barrier block between the waves that are happening outside, the sea that's happening outside, and what's happening inside of the little bay that is created, the little lagoonish type thing, right? And so as the waves, the two different waters meet, the water that's on the outside is trying to push itself into the island, and as it hits this break low, the current's pushing, the break pushes the water up and creates waves. That's what's breaking the ship apart. The ship is literally broken apart now. And the soldiers say, look, we have been in charge of these prisoners. We have to kill them, right? Because if they don't kill the prisoners, they can escape. And the prisoners escape, and then they went before the Roman officials. The soldiers could then be killed. It was their charge to keep the prisoners. They had failed keeping the prisoners under Roman law. They could be killed for having lost the prisoners. The centurion, so impressed upon by Paul, who he was, the man that God had created him to be in his character, and this God in whom he served wants to save Paul. And so he's like, we're not going to do that. We're not killing the soldiers. At this point, Paul has been a man of integrity, right? Which, by the way, is what they're reading business. Just in case you're a parent. Really cool. Lots of good resources on the men they've been learning about the men of integrity. All right, so I plug the kids ministry too. Paul being a man of integrity, right? Recognized by the centurion, all right, who's a man of integrity? the whole premise of his culture built upon it, being honorable, right, is now entrusting himself to this Paul, this crazy missionary, right, who has said, this is what God has said will happen. You should listen to me the first time, listen to me now. He is totally going to listen to him. He says, we're not killing the soldiers. We're not killing the prisoners. Any of the prisoners that can swim, just like all of us, will go over the side and will swim to safety. Before we do that, we're going to make sure that we have helped all those who cannot swim find debris, wood, planks, the ships being torn apart, find some debris for them. You have to understand they're jumping off of a boat that's being ripped apart on a reef by waves. That right there should indicate that some of them are going to die, all right? Die by the waves, some of them under the force being knocked out by debris from the ship, being knocked out by the reef itself. Some of them should have died. None of them died. They all make it safely to shore, and not one of the prisoners is trying to escape. That's amazing, right? The last point, really, as it was last week, our last point is a good reminder for us here again. This line coming from a clip that we listened to from the worship CD, Beautiful Eulogy, that his speaking is his doing, his being capitalized there. God says it, and it is so. It is so because God is who he says he is, and when God says something is, that's what happens. It's not just that it happens because God says it happens because God is who he is. His speaking is his doing. God has told Paul this is what will happen. You will go to Caesar. In the middle of the storm, it certainly seems like no one's going to Caesar. And he says, no. Don't worry. Be cheerful because my God has told me what will happen. This is what will happen. And at the end of the day, exactly what Paul says will happen happens. He doesn't know where they're going to run aground. We're going to run aground on some island, and not one life will be lost, or we're going to lose the cargo on the ship. That's what happens. Turns out where they've landed right now is the island of Malta. All right. When we're saying Malta is where they've landed, you think that perhaps this place would make great beer, perhaps they have lots of malt or something, or perhaps maybe like vanilla malt milkshakes. I tend to. Some people hate malt. Whoppers, maybe here at Malta, we can find some Whoppers. Amen. All right. So they landed at Malta. They don't know where they are. They just simply saw a beach. They headed for it. Just as Paul said, everyone is saved. And they're on Malta. As he says, so it is done. So it's done because he is who he is. That's who God is. So for response, under that point, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 verses. I just want to read them real quick to you. There's something to remember, and I'm really I feel like as we've kind of concluded Acts, constantly bumping up this concept that as God has said, so he does is a clear point. And I'm really thinking we have a really good time with the promises of God in a theological sense, maybe as a topical series. So that might be really good for us as a church to be encouraged and reminded. Here's some things in these 4 passages that God, as God says, so it is done. It will be so. Jeremiah, we can actually look there in order there, so we can go through them pretty quick. Jeremiah 29:13, you will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. This is also echoed if you go to Matthew chapter 7. Jesus then echoes this in the New Testament. Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and it will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives, and the one who seeks finds, and to the one who knocks it will be open. One of the things I want you to understand, if you're not really well acquainted with who God is, or maybe you're just a little curious, if you seek God, he will reveal himself to you. He does not hide himself from those who actually seek him. The question is, why are you seeking God? Why do you really want to seek him? Because the verse is clear. It's the person that's seeking God with his whole heart, really wanting to know what's going on. What is this place all about? How did this all come to being? How did this all happen? If you seek him in a way that you actually say, all right, show me. You say who you are, show me. God is faithful to reveal himself to you. How does he do that? Well, there is the Bible. There are people that you can ask and seek. There are actually things you can observe all around you in this known find at the end of the day. Much like a new scientific discovery that says, well, if the Big Bang has occurred, it should have created equal portions of matter and antimatter. The antimatter and matter should have canceled out. Now scientists are speculating that there's absolutely no reason for our universe to be in current state of existence. The Big Bang, as it, well, you all remember your laws of thermodynamics? Remember those? Yeah, right? That as a force happens, right, it creates, it basically discharges and creates equal parts energy. That energy, there's no loss of energy, right? And in that, also forces balance each other, right? You guys like go totally science with me here? Like a totally nerd on you? That as the Big Bang happened, it should have created antimatter and matter in equal portions, right? And antimatter and matter in equal portions would have canceled out. You're like, I don't know what antimatter is. It's okay. It's all right. I'm not doing that today. It doesn't matter. Oh, it's a good one. But, all right. And the scientists are saying there is no reason for our universe to exist in the state it is. That's because the Big Bang is not how it all went down, is it? All right. If you seek him, you will find him. Scientists continually keep climbing a mountain only to find sitting there theology at the end of the day. One is very reasonable. One, as Stephen Hawking has said, the universe is a necessary being, and so the universe needed to exist, therefore it created itself. That's a really smart man saying something really stupid. That's a total circular argument of a simple logical fallacy. All right. If you seek him, you will find him because he's faithful to what he has said. His speaking is his doing. All right, another really good one. Hebrews 13, 5-6. Keep your life free from love of money and be content. That's okay, keep reading. With what you have. For he has said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. So we can confidently say,
I don't know.
the Lord is my helper. I will not fear. What can man do to me? For those of you who know God, he has confidently allowed us to say there's no reason to fear because he will never leave us nor forsake us. As you look around and the world crumbles beneath your feet, as the circumstances in your life are broken and destroyed, he says, I will never leave you nor forsake you. Your joy is not attached in the momentary happiness that I created for you, but in the joy that I am your God and I will always love you. Whether this life is great or whether it is hard, whether it is beginning or whether it is ending, you will find me. I'll never leave you.
Amen.
It's a promise for those of us who know. All right. One really great one. Because it encapsulates in 1 Corinthians 15 this idea of the promise of God with what he has also called us to do. All right, so this is where we'll end. The sting of death is sin. All right, sin has happened. That is the violation of a holy God. We are unholy. We are the violation of perfect. God is perfect. We are imperfect. Sin is that missing the mark of God. All right. Sin brings death. Adam and Eve were not created with sin. Instead, they chose to sin. As they chose to sin, death came upon us. It's part of the curse of the creation. And so death and sin has followed since Adam and Eve, down to everyone. Thus the place that we live in. It's incredibly broken. All right. The sting of death is sin, and the power of sin is in the law. That is, right? God is holy, and we are not. We go into the whole law thing for you. We don't have time for that. God is holy, we are unholy. That is the law. God's law. God's way, everything will work perfectly without sin. We miss it, and therefore we have sin. But thanks be to God who gives us the victory. This is the promise. He gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. But more so, therefore, my beloved brothers, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that in the Lord your labor is not in vain. We don't need that now. We did that already. The promise here being, in Jesus, you are victorious. What are you victorious over? Right? You're victorious over these two very, very large things that encompass all of us. Sin and death. Why? Why? People, why? Remember, this is a great time to remember. We are victorious over sin and death in this way. We could not be victorious over sin and death. That's how we become victorious over it. All right, let me go a little further. Remember, this is for those of us that know this, for those that don't, hear and believe, or hear and remember. Jesus is God and man come to earth. Literally, in Christianity that observe the Judeo-Christian values, right? In the Christianity we believe, what we've seen in Acts, the following of the way, those that have taken Jesus as Messiah, as his word, to bring salvation to the whole world. Right? This is how it is. That we needed to be rescued, and we cannot rescue ourselves. We need a rescuer. We need the divine to interrupt the finite. That's what we need. And unlike every other religious construct, God is not above and in his creation. He is above, in, through, and a piece of all his creation. He enters the thing that he made so that as God and man beings can live. He cannot just live, but he lives a life that is completely sinless. When we did the Gospel of John, we saw Jesus' default modus operandi was, I'm not going to do what I want in my flesh. I'm going to serve the will of God the Father. Always, I will do the will of the Father. What does God desire for me to do? That is what I will do. He's setting an example. If you want to follow me, that's how you live. So he lives his whole life as God and man without sin, right? He's not the product of an earthly father and mother. He's a product of the Holy Spirit and a woman. There is no father to him. His father is God. That's Jesus. All right, for those of you that are having problems following this or having problems believing this, understand that you believe in a lot of things every day. Some of them far stranger than what I'm telling you. Some of them far less reasonable than what I'm telling you right now. We need to be rescued from our imperfection and our unholiness. Jesus comes to do that. God and man, walking in life, sinless, following God's will. Literally like the second Adam, he lives. He lives the whole time, never eating of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, rather serving only the will of the Father. He comes to the cross. This is not where sin kills him, because he has to be killed by sin. Remember, the sting of sin is death. The sting of death is sin. He has no sin, so he doesn't taste the sting of death. Rather, he's murdered. Because he has an earthly vessel, it can be killed, and we kill it. But not that he could have been killed by us. He has no sin. Rather, he gives his life on the cross, shedding his blood, right? Now, sin, right, and death are linked. Jesus has no sin. His death, his spilling of blood is the thing, that sacrifice is the thing that covers us. But he crushes sin for us. But now his body is broken and dead. It goes into the grave where it stays for 3 days, but it cannot stay there because death happens because of sin, and he has no sin, so he leaves the grave. What about people say? He leaves the grave conquering death for us. And that verse tells us in Hebrews, right? We'll never leave us nor forsake you. We can have confidence that we will follow God. What can man do that could possibly matter? Jesus has conquered sin, right? The problem that we cannot be a part of God because he is one we are not. He's conquered death, the thing that we all face that brings about incredible levels of hopelessness. There's now hope in sin and death that Jesus has conquered for us. That death does not end for us. Rather, Jesus has saved us. He has rescued us. He has given us his righteousness that we are unrighteous, right? He has given us his eternal peace and holiness because he is eternally peace and hope while we are not. And so we can sit here, right, and we can wonder how the world began, or we can say, wow, that's going to end really hopelessly for me. I want you to think about the fact that in a church this week, 26 people lost their lives. And the whole rest of the church was injured because a man who hates God and would much rather think that this world has hope not in a God, right, which leads to hopelessness. I'm just going to tell you, if you think you are all that there is, your life is very hopeless. Look at yourself. Can you honestly say you're all put together, that you have it all together, and everything's going great? That tomorrow will not hold for you the end of all that you hold dear. You can't. There's no hope in that. There's hope in God. And so a man that hates God walked in and shot up a church. And you know what? The people that came to aid, right? The people that were left alive, all their hope is placed in God. The man that died trying to take away hope did nothing to stop hope, but rather simply more vigorously, and as I hear the story, more vigorously in me, encourages the hope that God is so much larger than he could have ever been. That's amazing, is it not? That's the hope we have. And so what does Paul say in 1 Corinthians? Stand fast. Be immovable. And live in the love that God has given you. You don't need to be shaken when everything around you shakes. Because if my job dries up tomorrow, my hope wasn't in my job. Right? If my wife finally actually has her eyes illuminated and leaves me tomorrow, right? My hope isn't in my marriage. I probably deserve it. Right? If for some reason my legs are cut from me, my health is taken from me, Not in me was my hope placed. It was in God. We have heard traditional church hymns written by people stuck in the midst of some of the most horrendous situations. And they write things like, "In peace like a river, attended away." We have words coming from people who should be in hopeless, desperate situations. And Paul says, don't worry. Remembering hope that Jesus brought for us. And as he speaks, so he does. We had each service with ultimately with song. But we're just going to spend a few minutes in prayer. You guys can totally fine. Silence in our culture, silence has become an evil, bad thing, right? Dead airtime is horrible. Or if you're looking at strip malls, dark windows, horrible. You don't want any space of gathering silence. That's okay. If you don't know who God is, if this is a weird or new concept of God I've outlined for you today, I'm going to simply offer this to you. God is our Father. He communicates as Father. And for those of us that live, that's a tough one. But I don't have a perfect father. I can look at my father and put out plenty of false examples. And as far as fathers go, I have a great one. Some of us have far worse fathers with far more obvious gaping holes. That's not the kind of father that God is. He's a perfect father. So when we say we're going to respond, what we mean is we can respond by taking a minute and just talking to him. As you would the father you may have never had. The one that actually bends down on me to look you in the face with nothing but love in his eyes to hear your heart. Those of you that know me, I have 3 kids, 3 beautiful, wonderful, evil little kids. When they have questions of me, I want to stoop down and hear them. When they are having a hard time trying to express to me how they got hurt or what went wrong, I'm low in their face. I want to hear it so that I can. There should be a minute where you can talk to God. If you are somebody that knows who God is, I just want to encourage you. His speaking is his doing. If you are in that family of God, the speaking is his doing. Where have you desperately needed to remember? That he will never leave you. That he is always there. That you need but seek him. You will find him. And that you can be absolutely immovable if everything around you is crumbling because we have the faith of Jesus. For those of you that don't, talking to God is still legitimate. Like, how do I talk to God if I don't really know? But who are you? I don't know who you are. Help me understand. If this whole thing is not just some guy, by the way, if I say something stupid, I get nothing for doing this, okay? It's completely free. Just hearing some guy, I don't know, want to hear the sound of his own voice. If it's more than that, show me. Please, believe me, it is. Right? It's so easy to draw a crowd. I could have way more fun talking about a lot more other things than doing this on a Sunday morning. Legitimately. Rather, this is not about me sounding off, about God. So let's just take a minute, let's pray, let's one more song to end our service after that, and then we'll get out. Let's pray together.